And we are live, and take it away, Tony.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to It May Interest You to Know. I'm Tony Marcolini. I'm joined today with my co-host, Marti Mongiello and John Hartman, and a very, very special guest, Patricia Ward Kelly. Let's go. Welcome back, everybody. As I said before the intro, we're here today with Patricia Ward Kelly, trustee of the Gene Kelly Trust, president of Gene Kelly Legacy, wife of legendary Gene Kelly, author, historian, biographer. We are honored to have you here today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I was so happy that you reached out to find me. I always encourage people to do that, and you did it. So hats off to you.
Well, I'm a lifelong fan of your husband. I think I've seen most of his movies. My mom was a fan, so I was used to watching them from when I was young. I mean, he made dancing look so easy that, when I was a kid, I remember watching them and thinking I could, do the same moves across the living room, which of course I can. I have absolutely no dancing ability, 2 left feet. But he made you feel that. He made you feel that joy and that ability because he made it look so easy.
It's funny. He said that it was so hard to make it look so easy. So wow. That was his intention, to make it look effortless. And I think that's one of the great charms of it. And you saw that during this lockdown with COVID. Everybody was, the minute it would rain, everybody grabbed an umbrella and they were out imitating Gene out. And there were 3-year-olds and there were 103-year-olds out doing it. So I think that's what really distinguishes him, is that it does look simple. It looks like everybody can do it. And it's not, but it's not. As I said, Singing in the Rain is just a simple Irish clog dance that anyone can do.
Well, that's my favorite. Actually, Singing in the Rain is my favorite of his films. So, of course, Debbie Reynolds, Donald O'Connor joined him in that. But he, did some pretty amazing numbers. I remember splashing around, too, in the water, thinking I could make it look like that. And, of course, I can't. Did he take lessons from when he was young?
His mother sent him off to dance school when he was very young, but he hated every minute of it. The posturing, the bending over and handing a rose to a girl, and he just thought it was all for the birds. And the minute he would go, she would dress him up in little shorts and little stockings and polished shoes and Buster Brown collars and Windsor ties. And the minute he came home, the boys were waiting on the corner and would just beat him to a pulp. And so he said that the value of it was that he learned a very strong right. I mean, he learned to defend himself. He hated it. He didn't like to fight, but he had to. And the mother, Gene was going with his older brother then to these classes, and neither of them liked it. And they begged to get out. And to avoid the boys on the corner, she started sending them on the streetcar, but the boys would still wait for them. And then she's actually started using her hard-earned money to send them in a taxi, but the kids would find them regardless. And so she relented and let him stop. But then he got into high school, and he was small. He had skipped grades. He was such a brainiac. He had skipped the grades, and he was so adept at movement and dance and so charming, and he found out that the girls liked that, and so he decided he would go back to dance school on his own and pick up as much as he could. So but he never envisioned being a dancer. He never wanted to be a dancer. He wanted to be shortstop for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He wanted to be a hockey player. He was a tremendous skater and used to play hockey on the Homewood Cemetery in Pittsburgh that had a pond. And he said they beat the bejesus out of each other. But there was no professional team in Pittsburgh at that time. And he said as a baseball player, he was superb in the outfield. He was a superb. He could catch anything, but he was not good at hitting. He was a guy that they had to bunt over. So he figured that was not and then he decided he wanted to be a priest. And then girls came along and kind of broke that up. And then he wanted to be a lawyer, at like a couple of you. And he actually enrolled in law school at the University of Pittsburgh. And then he really thought it was kind of like the priest. He saw this guy out there, like, I want to be that guy. He's the orator down there. And so he saw the law as Clarence Darrow. He thought it was going to be this grand oratory, and then he found out it was really boring torts and liens, and so he ended up selling his books and going back and committing himself then to teaching dance, which ultimately he moved away from that, wanting to choreograph and head to New York. But the law was kind of an interesting one. I don't think that would have been a good fit for him in retrospect.
and would have deprived the world of an amazing talent.
Yes, as he said, they lost a great shortstop for the Pirates. But and it's funny, I set out to be a lawyer as well. I went to undergraduate school determined to be a lawyer, and I was very good friends with the then head of the Denver Law School, and he said to me, he said, don't do it. He said, it's not for you. It's not creative. You won't like it. You won't. And so I changed course and headed into English and Melville scholarship, and then kind of took a U-turn and ended up with Gene. So it was kind of a wild ride.
Right. You were a contributing scholar, correct, to the Herman Melville project?
I was in the Northwestern Newberry authoritative texts, which are quite wonderful. Most people don't buy them. They're not in every bookstore, but they're beautiful works because of the scholarship that's involved. And I always, the work on that as in the research was so helpful in the work that I do now, because I said that the first day I arrived, the professor said to me, he said, never trust the printed word. And I always trusted, you pick up something, it's in print. I thought, well, it's got to be true. And I realized very quickly that I figured if you pick up Moby Dick, it's Moby Dick. And then you find out, no, it's actually, there are multiple variations. And the same when you read, really made me distrust the things, particularly as I began to work with Gene, the written accounts of his life, and I realized none of it was very accurate. So I was taught to go to primary sources and to go do the real due diligence. And so it was very helpful because that's what I've done. Gene was very accurate in his accounts, I found, I think because he was wearing so many hats as director, choreographer, performer. But as a journalist, I felt it was, and historian, I felt it was necessary just to check that. So I would go to the Arthur Freed collection at USC and check the production notes, which literally they're two different accounts by two different people for every minute of every day.
Wow.
So it's very easy to dispel. Well, it's very easy to counter the mythology. Dispelling it is harder because people hang on to these myths, like that there's milk in the water and singing in the rain and things. And but it shows exactly. It'll say Gene Kelly from 942 to 943 changed pants due to tear in left cuff or something. I mean, it's very specific, and I'm not kidding about that. It's a kind of record because it was a business. It was businessmen who happened to like movies, but they had to keep track of every dollar and all the spending and everything. So
now I don't know if you'll consider it too private a moment, but Would you tell us the story of how you met Gene?
It's not private. It's funny. It's I mean, it's a little hard to believe because you are describing how your mother loved Gene and you loved Gene, and so I was in graduate school at the University of Virginia, thoroughly intending to go on to be a Melville specialist, and I got hired by a film company in Washington D.C. to do a film about Melville and then subsequent films about other American writers, and then they had a then they had a 90-minute television special about the Smithsonian, and they asked me to come on as a writer, and then they fired the two writers and brought me on as a writer. And originally it was to be Gregory Peck as the host narrator, and I had seen To Kill a Mockingbird, so I knew who that was. But then they said that Gene Kelly was going to be the narrator. I had no idea who that was. I didn't know. I honestly did not know the name, and I did not know if it was a man. I didn't know if it was a woman. They really were talking about this thing called Singing in the Rain, and I just didn't want to show my ignorance. So I just said, oh yeah, wow. And I played along, and Gene, as you might agree, was just terribly, terribly handsome. And he was one of the most eligible bachelors in the world at the time. And so all the women were literally on their phones. It was sponsored by Wang. It was in the early days when phones were about this big, and they were calling their mothers to say that they were sure that they could get a marriage proposal out of him by the end of the week. And so the director, who was a lovely guy who had started Masterpiece Theater and Zoom for television, decided that he would put me in the room to keep all of the other women away from Gene. And so it was this very whimsical meeting. I always describe it in my one-woman show. I describe it that Gene looked at me like something had been tossed in his cage. I don't think he'd ever seen anything quite like it. I had this long, thick brown hair parted in the middle in that 1980s style where you don't see anything but hair and a nose, and I was wearing a man's lumber jacket, and I had no makeup on, and high water corduroy pants and thick wool socks and clogs. And I looked like one of the New Yorker, the Koran cartoons. And he started off interrogating me, questioning me with things. The first question was, I bet it wasn't a question. It was more of, he said, I bet you don't know the opening lines to Yeats' poem, The Lake Isle of Innisfree. And I did. And he went through this series of I bet you don't knows. And by the end of it, I was kind of like, well, who does this guy think he is? I bet you don't know. And I spent the entire week working with him, having no clue of his celebrity. And we bonded over words and language, because my pet study in graduate school was etymology. It was word origins and poetry, and those were his pet studies. So we just sat there and quoted poetry back and forth and played word games, and I just listened to him. And he had this language, this wonderful blending of Pittsburgh street kid and erudite gentleman of slang and French and Italian street language and Latin phrases and poetry. It was just, and it was almost a celebration. It was a luxuriating into language and not a showing off of language. It was just how beautiful words are and the sound of words. And
Patricia, you're familiar with the word yins.
Yins, yeah.
And red up. Let's red up the house.
Downtown, and also Warsh, yeah.
Go down to the John Eagle.
Interestingly, when Gene first went to New York, Catherine Cornell took him aside and said, oh, my dear, you must meet with an elocution person to remove that accent. And so he did work with her elocution woman. And when he went back to Pittsburgh, everybody thought he was putting on airs, that they thought he was trying to be somebody else. And it was interesting when I first came out to interview Gene after he asked me to come out to write his memoirs. I came out, and I grew up in Fort Collins, Colorado, and I had a bit of a Western accent. which Gene then proceeded to surgically remove with pronunciation of, we said orange, and Gene said, Patricia, you're an educated woman. It is not an OR, as in it is an orange. And so I learned this language from him. And I think it's kind of funny because here he was a guy who had to have his extracted and I had mine extracted. And then I went home and asked for a glass of orange juice. And you can imagine how that went over in the Midwest. And the funny thing is now I live at 303 North Orange Drive. So every time I order something online, everybody says, "Oh, you mean orange?"
Yeah, it's I grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area, Jersey, and so Baron de Kalb is very famous, for fighting in the Revolutionary War. But when I moved down here to Charlotte, we have a street here, DeKalb Street. Now you can say DeKalb or DeKalb, but around here they say, "You talking about decab? Decab, you go on down to decab and then you take it all the way down to the hospital." I was like, decab? There's three different pronunciations.
Well, you can imagine my mother's from a Kansas farm family, and you can imagine me going there to ask about the rodeo because we lived on Rodeo Drive. And, there were no rodeos in Kansas then. You go to the rodeo.
I had to go get his picture and put that up there because I couldn't talk about him any longer without seeing that smiling face.
Oh,
and he's smiling right now. He's probably with us or sitting here or.
It's a great shot. It really shows him. He just had it was a beautiful face. I've never really seen anything quite like it, honestly. And obviously I'm biased, but I have his mask that was used by MGM for makeup and things. And I look at it and he's handsome, but it's not a rugged handsomeness. It's not like many of the actors of the day. There's a real beauty, I think, in his face. Oh, do you mind if I let my dog go?
Please do.
She's trying to open a closed door. Let me see if that works.
Our last guest, by the way, we never got a real big chance, did we, gang, to meet Arnold Palmer?
Oh,
yeah.
What?
We had our last guest had a dog named Arnold Palmer. So and we kept saying, "Put Arnold Palmer on."
Picture Tommy John has a dog that he named Arnold Palmer.
That's hilarious. I thought, wait a minute, because my dad wanted me to be a professional golfer and started that early on. I wish I had done that. I would have, I could have paid my rent, but instead I ended up marrying a legend. I guess if I'd wanted to make a living, I probably should have stayed as a golfer, but I think this is okay.
Well, your husband was a big sports fan, like Pittsburgh, right?
Loved Pittsburgh, the Steelers. He always rooted for the underdogs. So if it was, he didn't like the rich. Didn't like the rich sports teams like Dallas Cowboys and things like that. He was always
didn't like the Cowboys.
He kind of liked the underdogs, so he'd root for the guys he liked the common man, and he didn't like the really wealthy groups. So
like on Sunday during football season, did you know that those 3 hours you could not bother him? He had to be watching the Steelers.
Monday night football, basically. Okay. He just would be glued to it, and baseball. And it was interesting when I first came out here to meet with him, before he had even asked me to write his memoir, he told me to come out to talk about some things. And I came out, and it happened to be the precursor of the World Series. So the on every night. And so I didn't know if we would be going out to dinner. I didn't know what we were going to be doing. Well, what I found out is that I was boiling hot dogs, weenies. I was boiling hot dogs with yellow American mustard, and we were sitting in front of the television watching baseball. And Gene is meanwhile describing the connection between classical ballet and baseball and the movements. And it was this incredible education. And the same, he thought there was nothing more beautiful than a forward pass. I mean, he saw in all of the movements of the sports, the elements of dance. And in fact, in the 1958 special that he did, Dancing a Man's Game, he brought in all of the top people in their field. So he had Mickey Mantle, he had Johnny Unitas, he had Vic Seixas, he had Sugar Ray Robinson, and they all came in. And it's called Dancing a Man's Game, and he's trying to show that the movements in dance are the same movements in these sports that guys watch and think are okay, and yet they see a guy dancing, and it was not okay. And so he had, Mickey Mantle do something, and each person was to do one of their select moves, and then Gene took each piece and created a dance and performed it. So, wow. But it's what's so interesting. That's 1958 for Omnibus. You'd think we would have ended that discussion by now about it being inelegant for a man to dance. We're still talking about that. Why is that still a subject now? He had hoped to crush it back then, but it still pops up remarkably so. But I don't think most people, even to this day, think about the deep connection between Gene's movement and sports. And after he died, I found a folder in his drawer that he would cut stuff out of the newspapers, and it was always out of the sports pages. And so it might be the basketball players leaping up, but you can see each one is a dance move. And he loved it when the sports writers would say, so Gretzky came in and it was a Gene Kelly or something. I mean, he loved it because he was often referred to, the sports writers here, particularly in LA, would write, and a certain slide would be a Gene move or something. So yeah, his whole style of dance is shaped around sports, because he looked around and he wanted to create a particularly American style of dance, but there was no model. Well, how does a man move? And so the only way he knew how to do it was he looked to sports. And so if you look at his style of dance, it's very broad, open strokes and very low to the ground. It's a kind of brought down, and you see hockey, the wide, broad movement in hockey and baseball and things. So, and gymnastics, obviously, he was a trained gymnast. He was a trained acrobat. He could walk a tightrope. He was any form of movement he basically liked, except the only thing he didn't want to do was play golf. That was not his.
Not enough moving.
Yeah, that just bored him to tears. He said, "Why am I going to
swing it and that's it?
Chase this little white ball around?" So that was not his thing. That was a Stairs thing, but not Gene's thing.
Did he have a favorite movie of his own that he had done?
Well, people always asked him that, and he would usually say it was On the Town, because it broke new ground with being shot on location with the numbers there. And that really was, it was a very big thing for the French New Wave, the Nouvelle Vague, that the French directors began to use that format that Gene had used when they're all in New York City shooting all over. But then to me, he said, but I really liked Three Musketeers. He loved the kind of daring do, and his childhood hero, one of them was Douglas Fairbanks Sr. And so you get to see him with all the swashbuckling and the leaping over things and the whimsy, the humor that he had, that kind of, that kind of twinkle in his eye and that nod of his head and everything that you see. And so I love Three Musketeers, but he really liked, I think, certain number. He never liked to watch his own movies. He hated it. I made him do it, but he always saw things he could do better. But he liked certain numbers. He was very proud of the roller skating number. He thought that was the best song he ever put over. He was proud of Heather on the Hill, the Pas de Deux with Sid Charisse and Brigadoon, American Paris Ballet, things. So he had select things, and those are things I've then taken and put in my one-woman show and in my symphonic show, or some of they're his favorites, but also my favorites. And they show the diversity of his choreography. I mean, and the diversity of his dance. So you see a Spanish number, a gymnastics number, a tap number, a ballet number. He really could execute and create the breadth of every work.
Now he did a few those you mentioned On the Town. There were a couple of movies. I think Anchors Away, On the Town, maybe a third one. The name escapes me if there was one. But for the young Frank Sinatra, right, who did not know how to dance when he was thrust into the movies with Gene. What was that like, having to teach Frank Sinatra to dance?
He said it was great, because he said, I mean, they were dear friends. They were really, as Gene said, they were closer than brothers and had great respect for each other and really were friends to the end of Gene's life. Frank helped me a lot at the end of Gene's life. And Gene said that he trained like a prize fighter. He really got dug in there. He was going to do it. And I think the only thing that Gene said, it was very easy because he had taught so many young kids how to dance. That was what he did before he went to Broadway. He was a dance teacher. So he knew how to teach people who didn't know how to dance. And he basically used the same skills and translated that to Debbie Reynolds and Frank Sinatra and Olivia Newton-John. And as he always said, you choreograph to the non-dancers. So you choreograph to people. I'll read these accounts that are totally inaccurate. That it's the security team has just gone out. The doorbell just that you choreograph to the other person to make them shine. Sometimes I'll read that Gene tried to outshine everybody. That was never the case. He knew that you look better by the people you're surrounded by. So that so you don't take away from them, you make them look, and that only elevates you. So
that's really a life lesson, I think, for a lot of people working on teams, just in leadership or business. When we come back from a commercial break, I want to ask you about your White House visit and what you thought of our food. As you know, I was a White House chef. I was there in 1994 when you were our guest, and I'd like to get your opinion on our cookery.
Did you ever miss someone who has passed away? Now there's Miss You Gram app, giving people a brand new way to tribute the lives of deceased loved ones, or simply remember tender memories. This exclusive app is a user-friendly social media platform, giving people everywhere a respectable and comfortable place to create private or public memoriams. Miss You Gram has additional features like chat rooms and links to deceased databases and inspirational quotes. Users can also comment and connect on public posts. Join us and keep memories alive forever. Everyone wants to be remembered. For more details and download on the Google Play or Apple App Store, visit miss-u-gram.com.
Well, this episode is when screaming guests are lit on fire inside the White House. So I know that everyone's thinking, like, what did he just say? It's one thing to... Oh my gosh, and who knew in Abilene High School that we would be able to get a photograph from Julie Eisenhower? She sent this to us.
Join former White House chef Marti Mongiello as he brings to life colorful stories about America's presidents and first families that have occupied 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue Northwest. It's time to be informed and entertained with Inside the President's Cabinet. Visit the website today at www.insidethepresidentscabinet.com. I'm Marti Mongiello from the United States Presidential Culinary Museum, and welcome to another episode of Inside the President's Cabinet. Well, we are back again, and I promised the audience that when we come back, I was going to ask Patricia about her meal at the White House. We were very lucky to serve her in 1994 while I was there under the Clinton presidency. And Patricia, how did it go? And please tell us, of course, all about, I know why you were there, but for our worldwide audience on 6 continents, if you would share the illustrious occasion.
And he really wants you to say how good his cooking was. Let's
Exactly.
face it.
And
maybe she choked on a fishbone.
And we know we won't get that right away because he's dying for that. But but no, it was really, I have to say, it was such a stunning experience to be in the White House. I mean, Gene and I had been there before as for the Kennedy Center Awards and things. So, and it was always we were there under the George Bush Sr. for that. And then I got to come back when President Clinton presented Gene with the National Medal of Arts. And Gene was really proud to receive that, and particularly to receive it from Bill Clinton. I think that was the right president at the time to present that to him. And Gene was not able to go. He had had his stroke, and so he was still in the hospital. So I went and was able to accept that. And it was quite an amazing array of people. Celia Cruz received it, David Brubeck, Tebow, the artist. It was just this Julie Harris. I mean, you kind of walk into this ethereal group of people, but I must say the dinner was really wonderful, and the presentation. I love the table settings and everything, and I had James Fallows, the editor from The Atlantic, seated on my right, one of the writers, and I remember the bagpipes coming in, and it just was absolutely thrilling. And the one thing that really stood out for me, I must say, was the finger bowls that that were at the table, which I think James Fallows and I were the only two who really knew what they were and what you were to do with them. And the others were just about to drink them. And we kind of cautioned that that wasn't what you were supposed to do, and that it was just a beautiful way to cleanse your fingers. And so that was kind of a great memory of that. But it was, I don't know, it's just such a special evening. It's just so beautiful, and beautiful in every way, and every element, from the dishes that are chosen and everything, the literal physical dish, but then each of what you had on the menu. And I imagine, I didn't have time during your break to dash to the archives to grab my file on the event, but I imagine would you have printed a menu, or would you have printed, would there have been?
Yes.
I recall there
So
being
the menu, each of them is written by a calligrapher, and some of those events will start months ahead of time to write enough of them. It may take that long, so yeah. Do you want to have the whole menu again? Would you like to have it?
Oh, I would love to have it. And if there was anything on the table, I'm sure that I grabbed it. If there was my name card and I'm sure it's in the archive. I just didn't have a chance to scout what was in there. And I did not do the gauche thing, though, of picking up the china and turning it over to check to see what it was. I was dying to, of course. I mean, you want to see. I mean, I really believe in that kind of. I love dinner parties and setting dinner tables and things. It's kind of, I collect antique china and crystal and silver, and I just think there's an elegance and a kind of important thing about dining that I think is really lost now. I think now the fast food notion is. We're missing something, because to have multiple courses and conversation, and it's a very different. And Itzhak Perlman was there, and he played that during that weekend, and Clinton spoke obviously that night, mm-hmm. And it was just, those are those things that you just kind of. I mean, I was by myself, which was really. It was kind of odd, because I was kind of the odd man out. Everybody else was, Harry Belafonte was there with his then wife. Everybody was sort of with somebody. And I remember that we had to come in, and as we entered to go into the receiving line, the musicians, the White House musicians, played whatever music was, you could tell who was coming through. So of course, Take 5 came on as Dave Brubeck came through, and Harry Belafonte was this calypso, and Celia Cruz, you can imagine what that was. Well, guess what it was for Gene? So here I'm standing there with this guard next to me. You were given little cards that said what your table was and whether you were
sure
1A or something, if you were where you were supposed to go. And I had this incredible tall man in a uniform, and he said to me, "Ma'am, I suppose people have told you this before, but that's a beautiful dress." I just was like, "Thank you, sir." And so Singing in the Rain plays, and I lost it. And I come around the corner, and there's President Clinton standing there with Mrs. Clinton next to him, and I just had to kind of pull it together and go up to him. And as you know, President Clinton is known for shaking hands, and you are sure you are the only person in the room. There's nobody else there. He's only talking to you. Everybody else has vanished and I remember shaking the hand, and it was so long. I kept thinking, shouldn't we like break this off? And then he said to me, "That's a beautiful dress." And and it's this blue gown, Oscar de la Renta gown, velvet gown and everything. So it was kind of, but I had just, I mean, this is really going off topic, but we were staying at the Hay Adams, and I had gone in to I had started after Gene got sick in order to stay at the hospital with him all the time. I had just cut my hair. I had long hair and I just cut it off really short. And I had gone in right before to this, going off to Washington for this event. And I had gone into this new woman, and she took a man's razor and she just sheared my hair like a man's cut. I mean, it was really, and it wasn't quite what I wanted, but it was what I had. And here I was going to Washington. And I remember coming out the door of the Hay Adams Hotel, and I had on this Oscar de la Renta that was like I looked like I belonged in a castle. It had a very low cowl neck, but then a high neck here, and these gorgeous amulet arms of embroidered, beaded. I'm standing there, and this man walks in with a woman. He looks very elegant. He's dressed very well, so is she, very appointed. And he looked at me. He said, "Did you actually pay someone to do that to your hair?" And you're just, you just kind of go,
oh, ouch.
And yeah, and I had been trying. There was some confusion in getting the car for me. Somehow I got kind of off the list, and every car would pull up, and I was standing there waiting, and they'd say, "Oh no, this is for Mr. and Mrs. Harry Belafonte," and then they'd be like, "No, this is from Mrs. Celia Cruz," and then pretty soon I just kind of went. And Eric Hawkins, the dancer, choreographer, and his wife got in a car, and I said, they said, you better just get in and come with us, because I really didn't know if they were going to send a car. And so I thought I better get over to the White House. But I mean, these are those things that you just can't believe, and then you're in the White House and you're with the president. And I have to say, as we went around the room in the White House, the Rosa Parks was there too. It was these, you can't write this stuff, and
No.
and I'm looking, of course, President Clinton, just the room just is illuminated by him, but the one who was the most scintillating to me was Mrs. Clinton. She was just so spot on, and that's when I sat up and went, whoa, this woman is spectacular. So
She sure is. Yeah, I used to kid around with them and stuff, and people wanted to kill me when I would go out there for talking too much. They said, "You definitely have too much to say," but they would call me out there into the dining room in their house up at Camp David, Aspen, their private home. Wow. And just chat you up and talk, and you may be standing out there 5, 10, 15 minutes talking, and I would make jokes and stuff, which would infuriate admirals and Secret Service people, and they just were very, very nice. But one night I did tell them, yeah, definitely you don't want to piss off 2 attorneys who are law professors. And Bill says, "What's that supposed to mean, Marty? Maybe tonight is going to be the night you get fired." I was like, "Well, sir, I mean, if I'm going to make a special salad dressing for Mama, you don't call her Mama." I was like, "Then I'm going to make one for Papa." So I made a mango dressing for Hillary, and I made a banana vinaigrette dressing for Bill, which was both of their favorite fruits. But, you have to be smart when you're dealing with law professors. But Hillary is very well spoken and has been a fist fighter all her life, all the way back to college when she first started rallies to get tampon dispensers put into the ladies' restrooms, which was, people were like, "This is outrageous. It's sickening. It's disgusting. This woman's going to go," all types of stuff. So the battles today are old hat really to Hill. And I still have been donating to her. I think I've been a donor for her fund forever. I'm a monthly donor.
I think about her a lot in a sense of when if you have sort of slings and arrows that come at you, and they do, and especially I think if you're a young woman who marries a celebrity, it tends to be in the tabloids. I was always the one who was the wolf in sheep's clothing. I remember that was one of my headlines, and I wasn't prepared for any of that. I didn't know this world. I didn't know how cruel this world could be and everything. And So I use her as kind of an example, because I think, how on earth does she even get up in the morning? Because if she took all of this to heart, you would never wake up. You'd never get out of bed. And so she's actually been she doesn't know it, but she's been a real model for me in terms of just having to keep going on with what is important, stay focused on the goal, and don't get distracted by all the many people who want to take you down for whatever reason. And boy, she's just gets it right and left. And for being a bright woman, I mean, that's what's so amazing, is that but in that room, I saw her acknowledge, shake hands with Rosa Parks' family and everything. And she knew exactly, she'd done her homework for the room. She knew who everybody was. She knew exactly what to say, and was really, it was a phenomenal experience. I'll never forget it. And that meal, I can't tell you, that meal was just out of this
You finally got it out of her, Marty. There you go. Okay, you happy?
I can't wait to, and I'll share it with James Fallows because but the finger bowl stood out because, I know who was there at my table. Lillian Vernon was there. And remember the catalogs of Lillian Vernon?
Yeah, of course. Oh my gosh.
My dad would always order stuff from Lillian Vernon. And here I am with Lillian Vernon, who came to about here on me. And she thought I was single, so she kept trying to set me up with her son, who was at my table. And I kept going, no, I'm married. But and I shouldn't say it, but he was one who needed a little help with what that finger bowl was. So,
well, we were laughing earlier, right, when I said Nikita Khrushchev picked his up and was drinking out of it. So to avoid embarrassment, Jackie Kennedy picked hers up and started drinking out of it. And so then many other people at the table did. Yeah.
It's always hard when you're not at you're always trained. You watch the you watch the hostess and watch what she does and when she moves and what fork she picks up. And so but when you're at a table like that, you're a little on your own because there's no hostess there. So I was not the closest to the dais. I was a little bit away from that, but you obviously couldn't see what they were doing. But it's not quite as strict as the royals. I did have dinner at Windsor Castle with Prince Charles, and
wow,
and boy, that's one that you have to really follow the protocol on that one. And I hadn't gotten my protocol instructions. Came to my house. I was in Europe, and they came. I missed them, so I didn't get any of the instructions, like the things. But I knew them. That you're not supposed to look the royals in the eyes. You're not supposed to speak to them first. You're not supposed to do anything. And so I did okay on that. But you know that when the minute they stand up, you whether you're finished with your meal or not, you get up and walk out.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Prince Charles was such a cool guy, too. Since I was in the Navy 30 years, I'm going to give him a plug. He was a big Navy man. Not a lot of people know that he was in combat actions during World War II in the Mediterranean and several large battles. They've never heard these things. And at the White House one night, a couple of our butlers went in and Solomon said, "Oh, excuse me, sir, Your Majesty, may we get you a drink?" And he said, "Oh, no. I'll have a drink, but only if I can make it. And it's going to be martinis shaken." So they were like, we could never do that, Your Highness, please. He's like, "No, that was part of the deal, man. That was part of the deal. I make them, I shake them." So he was over there doing all that, and pouring them. And
Wow.
He was just having such a fun time. Yeah, just a wonderful guy.
Well, speaking of Navy men, Gene was a Lieutenant JG in the Navy, and
Oh my gosh.
father was an ensign in the Navy.
wow.
He was young. My dad was born in 1925, and Gene was born in 1912. So Gene's father-in-law was younger than he was. But
Amazing.
But
Amazing.
My dad was on a destroyer escort, and Gene was based at the Naval Photographic Unit in Anacostia, Maryland, and he made a lot of the training films. One called Irritability, about a thing that we now call PTSD, and Gene shot about the wonderful films about the bomb plastique, the things that they would use in battle, and actually his time in the Navy, it was because he was working in the Brooklyn Navy Yard about the ship that limped its way home. So he knew all the people at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and that was why he could shoot on the town at the Brooklyn Navy Yard, because he knew them. So he got permission. Nobody else could do that. And that was one of the reasons why On the Town was so revolutionary, because the final sequence, that you'll have to run it again, but when you watch it again, the battleship is there at the dock, and they're all saying goodbye and everything. And when they shot that scene, Gene was down as director, and his co-director, Stanley Donen, was up on the boom with the camera operator, and it was cloudy. And at that time, the instruction was, and it was literally, you Technicolor people on a Technicolor film, they would send a Technicolor expert on each shoot, and you had to abide by the Technicolor parameters, and they guided everything. And never, Technicolor hadn't been shot in low light like that, and so the camera operator said, it's a no-go, we can't do it. And Gene knew that ship was going to pull out, that you don't call the ship to come back for a retake, that he had one opportunity for that ship to leave the harbor. And so Gene just went like this. It signaled it to go ahead. And the camera operator took the clapper board, the black and white clapper board, and turned it upside down, which is a signal to say, I'm shooting this under protest. I know this will not turn out, but I'm letting you know I know this. And they shot it, and Gene said he came home he and Stanley Donen came back to California, and they thought they had nothing in the can. And it turned out it was beautiful. And that then it enabled them to shoot Technicolor in many, many different situations after that point. So it's kind of an interesting thing. But also, while Gene was in New York, he ran around, and that's when he figured out he could shoot on location, because he scouted all the different places. And, they didn't have permits. They just grabbed shots, and they'd stuff Frank Sinatra. They had a yellow cab instead of limousines to transport Frank, because Frank was the hottest thing in the world at the time. So they would grab Frank, stuff him on the floor of the cab, race to the location, pull him out. Gene had a little stopwatch in him, and they'd count out the beats, and they'd do their number, stuff Frank back in the bottom of the cab, and race to the next place. And so it's it's pretty fun. You do see in the shot with Rockefeller Center, people have begun to realize Frank Sinatra's on the loose in New York City, and they're gathering there over the skating rink area. But it's again 1950, 1949. It's 1949 when that came out. These things are over 70 years old, and they hold up. This is and Julie Munchin. Here they are up at the top of the tall buildings in New York, and Julie Munchin was afraid of heights, so they had to put a rope around his legs because he was petrified as they were going to the edge to look over and everything. So they're, it's just guys on the town and grabbing stuff. Now, can you imagine a film crew now, Hollywood film crew? Nothing would happen like that. They'd have 8 cameras and 4 million extras and dog bone makers, and it's a different business now.
For certain. I mean, he danced with, I want to say, Judy Garland, Fred Astaire. I mean, all the greats. Did he tell you anything interesting about, some of the people he danced with that you'd like to share with us?
Well, he loved Judy Garland, and he really credited her with teaching him how to appear in front of the camera. He had no clue. And the director for Gene's first movie was For Me and My Gal. in 1942, and Gene was used to performing on a stage, which is very different from the camera. And so Judy just basically kind of grabbed him by the neck and told him what to do and how to sit in a chair and how to kiss on camera and everything. And so he always gave her a lot of credit. He loved her. And he thought it's interesting because when you read the contemporary accounts of her, she literally is described as an ugly duckling. And Gene thought she was not only the brightest person in Hollywood, he also thought she was the sexiest woman in Hollywood. And they ended up doing the 3 pictures together and were set to do Easter Parade together. And then Gene's friend accidentally broke Gene's ankle in a backyard volleyball game. So that brought Fred Astaire out of retirement to dance to Gene's choreography in Easter Parade that changed the trajectory of Fred Astaire's career to go on to do things like Bandwagon, and it really changed his choreography. So he was influenced by Gene. Gene was not influenced by Fred, which is an interesting, people don't know that.
Wow, that is interesting. He broke his ankle. I wasn't even aware of that. Did that hinder? I mean, I assume he obviously recovered. He still went on to a career, but what was that like? I mean, anybody who has an injury knows afterwards you're never quite the same, and you're...
Well, as he always said, dance is a masochistic sport, and you dance hurt. He danced with torn hamstrings. He danced with sprained ankles. He danced with torn ligaments. There's a number with Mitzi Gaynor and Gene in Les Girls that is danced to Cole Porter's "Why Am I So Gone About You." They're both injured. She had a sprained ankle, and he had a torn hamstring, and you can't see it. And he said to Mitzi, he said, "Do you want to stop and wait and recover?" And she said, No, let's go on. You go on. And I think if you talk to any dancer, they're mostly dancing injured and trying to just protect their bodies. But Gene always said it's the thing that's the great irony about dance is that by the time you really begin to understand your instrument is already in decline. And so, especially for men, you would really peak at a very early age, and then it's just kind of, I think dancers are dancing longer now than they did before, but he said, of course, if you play the violin, you can play till you're 101, but he bowed out of dance. He said, when I could no longer jump over the tables, I bowed out because he wanted people to remember him as able to do that, not as somebody that you kind of go, ooh, he didn't quite make that. But he skied in Switzerland, and he tore his knee out in Zermatt, and he ran a ski pole through his thigh in Cloisters, and he wasn't supposed to be doing any of this stuff, but those injuries took it down. He was often in what's it called when you're to stretch your back out, you're kind of in a
physical therapy or traction.
Traction. He was in traction a lot for his back, and his back was just kind of these shreds and shards of things. But so yeah, the broken ankle was just one of many broken things and torn things. If there's one number he does that I include in my show, it's a terrible movie called Living in a Big Way, about the post-war housing for veterans. Gene and Olivia de Havilland were on the committee to try to provide housing for people. And this was a movie kind of dedicated to that, and it's on the building site. And Gene has a sprained ankle, torn ligaments, I think, in that one, actually. And you can't imagine it with what he's doing and bending that and smiling and everything. So, and that reminds me, this is a little off point, but you're kind of talking about these people and what they stood for. And one of the things I wrote last year for the Chicago Tribune was a piece about Gene and the anti-lynching law. And Gene was one of the signers in 1947, along with people like Albert Einstein, to try to get a law to prevent lynching. And talk about deja vu. I mean, we're still talking about that, and people are still denying that we need a law to prevent lynching, and lynching's still happening. It's just kind of mind-boggling. But I found I found all these documents and all these people and Gene's work in the 1947 efforts for that. And it was, it was the underdog. It was always trying to fight for the other guy who might not have a chance. So I was thinking I know Roseanne Cash is working on the lynching, trying to prevent lynching. And I thought I'd reach out to her and maybe see if we could join forces and do something with that. I don't know. It's
Very
like kind of a no-brainer, don't you think?
Yeah, really.
You would think. And it is
Well,
a shame.
Franklin, it was in the 30s, actually, and Franklin Roosevelt, it would have become law, but Franklin Roosevelt opposed it. So the anti-lynching legislation.
Well, Roosevelt, and that it was Eisenhower too, who and they didn't want the mess of it in the so it was and it was the White House that prevented it, and everybody's gathering outside the White House. Everybody's in Washington marching, and they decided it didn't look good for the White House.
Yeah,
So,
it was kind of weird too. You know, when they would go up to Hyde Park and stuff, they had separate areas for the blacks to eat in, our servants, you know, behind the scenes. They were not allowed to sit with each other or mingle with each other. Just the butlers and the waiters and the chefs, they had to go eat in their room. Same thing at the White House. Both him and her, some people have tried to blame Eleanor, and was like, no, this was the rule from mommy and daddy. So it's kind of weird to hear about that, to read about that, but it is the truth. Yeah. As great of a president as he was.
well, and in Hollywood, you had an actor like Sidney Poitier who could not enter the same, even on a film shoot, couldn't enter the same, stay in the same hotels as the rest of the crews when director Richard Brooks was shooting. And Richard Brooks said, no, we will not stay in separate places. And so it's certain people, I think, who stand up for those things. But anyway, I don't know. I found the list of all the people who signed it, and then I found all of the heirs to that. So I thought if we could get all the heirs to the signers together to try to do something. I don't know. That was in my spare time last year. And now I have a new ballet, Gene's ballet from
Cool.
that he premiered in 1960 at the Paris Opera. It was the first time ever that an American-born choreographer had premiered at the Palais Garnier, and the first time ever for jazz music. And we're remounting that with Scottish Ballet on September 23rd in Glasgow. So I'm flying to Scotland to do that, and it should be spectacular. It's to Gershwin's Concerto in F, and so that'll be an exciting thing to get out, and the first thing for everybody to see since COVID, and for the performers after 18 months. So.
And you're still writing his biography, am I correct? You're still going to continue with that project?
Oh yeah, no, it's all around me here. But I actually thought that I would be devoting, certainly January to now on it's more of a memoir than a straight biography. But then the head of Scottish Ballet reached out to me, and he decided that he wanted to move forward with the ballet. Originally had it positioned in 2024, but he thought it would be a good one to open the season after people are yearning for that kind of joy, I think. And they had Meyerling set, and that's a pretty dark story. So he decided to put this in. And so I kind of set the book aside temporarily and focused on that. And it's really interesting. I was going through Gene would handwrite his choreography on a score and then go in and translate it to the dancers. And the score I have with all his handwritten notes, which are very hard to read, but it's such a wonderful assemblage of, not only did he have the language facility of French, Italian, and everything, but in dance he has it. And so you see things like, this is just an example of, these are the things he's written: knee, Yugoslav, kick to, pas de bourrée, over the foot, pirouette, bourrées, piqué, Alton step from his mentor and Broadway, John Alton, swing low or sway like the Charleston beat. So you've got this, and he's got Jewish wedding, and then he's got things like jazz walk, bent corkscrew, fouettes. So it's classical ballet terminology mixed with tap terminology mixed with Lindy Hop terminology and jitterbug, and there's a tango in here, and he could just from one bar to the next move from a classical move to a contemporary jazz move, and it's a pretty exciting piece. So if you all want to come to Scotland, come on over.
Where can people get information about this? Scottish
Ballet just put it on their website today, and tickets just
wow.
So it's yes. So if they go to Scottish Ballet, they can see the descriptions and some of the backstory and how this all kind of came into being. And and there will also be filming it. So it will be a film in addition to because we weren't sure if the theaters would open, so we decided to go and film it in addition. So go to Scottish Ballet. I post all the time on Facebook at Gene Kelly The Legacy, and on Instagram at Gene Kelly Legacy. So I will start posting about it now that we've been holding off because we didn't know if quarantine was in place or what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, they're just finally coming out strong now, so that's really good.
John is very quiet over here.
I'm just taking it all in. I'm really enjoying it.
Okay. All right. We just didn't want to leave you out. I wanted to tell you your food is fantastic. I love your food too. No, I actually enjoyed your book. I was glad I got it. I had to, whenever Gene and I went to parties, he'd say, "Oh Christ, I've got to pimp the party to find out who was going to be there and everything." And so I felt like, well, I had to pimp the party and find out if, I read that you wrote a book. So I thought, well, I better get this book.
Miss Kelly, your pimp hand is very strong But September 23rd, we're from New Jersey, is Bruce Springsteen's birthday, just so you know.
Oh, there you go. So, we'll have a little competition going on, but I think we'll fill the house in Glasgow, and then it's supposed to go on a tour. It'll go to Aberdeen and Inverness and Edinburgh, and ultimately.
Oh man!
Can I ask you a question about the memoirs? Are those going to be given to a university one day, or
the written?
You said you have paperwork there at your house.
I have everything here. I mean, that's what I inherited from Gene, is his archives, and the mythology is that everything burned up in his house fire, and his house did burn in 1983. It was a faulty Christmas bulb on a dry branch, and it took the house. The house was one of the original farmhouses on Rodeo Drive when it was literally a bridle path. The horses used to come down the middle of Rodeo Drive, and so it was a very unassuming kind of wooden house and he had red shutters. It was very charming. It looked more like a Connecticut cottage, and it was like a tinderbox. It just went up very quickly, but his papers and photographs and things were in a back room, and so many are smoked. Even this his Gershwin score is smoked around the edges, but it's saved. But to your question, I've finally kind of decided, after I looked and scoped out all of the different collections and universities and different places where things can be deposited, there's a real problem with a lot of things because people donate materials and then they just basically get lost. I mean, they just are never seen again. They're never cataloged. They're never
curated. They're never brought out for display and to become parts of new and exhilarating exhibits.
Yeah, well, you know the story, and so since I think Gene entrusted me with it because I had the archival experience, so I put everything in archival sleeves. I'm trying to get a database as best as I can. The technology changes so quickly, and I kind of decided that what I was going to do, because I thought the dance companies all come here to my house. I have the archives here. I don't have a sofa here. I can't sit. This is the only chair that nobody else can sit here. I have this chair. And then behind that door, it's 85 filing cabinets. They're 3-drawer, 36-inch, a 5-drawer, 6-inch filing cabinets, so you can only go single file
Like law office.
through my house. And the dogs, it's so funny because they can't turn around, so they just jump over each other, and I can't turn around, and so ultimately I thought that, but the companies come here. So Matthew Bourne's company comes. The Australian Ballet was here with 80 people. I had 50 people from the Royal Ballet. And I haven't finished my kitchen yet, so I don't have an oven, so I cook everything in a toaster oven, which is hilarious. So I have these famous toaster oven dinners that I cook for 50 people, and you can do it. I mean, the French do it all. Well, you don't need a big fancy kitchen like these Beverly Hills kitchens to do.
I cooked on submarines for years, and it's amazing. Sometimes I'll go into the 2%. They call me, will you come and help us create Downton Abbey, Marti, and everything at the White House and how to do it? And we fired 4 people already, and we're afraid with another household manager, it's becoming chaos for the children. They don't know who the next nanny is. And a lot of times it's like the Von Trapp family, you got to go through a couple of governesses to get the one you want. But, they'll show me the kitchen, and one of our clients said, I want to rip it all out, Marti, and gut it and do a brand new $3 million one for my wife. And I was like, well, this is a pretty awesome kitchen already. I mean, it's got everything. This is like at least $2 million in here right now. He's like, well, just, let's just, and don't throw the stuff away. Sell the tile and sell the equipment. But I want her to, I told her $3 million. So, we got to do it. I was like, yeah, all right, well, we'll sell everything or donate it. Would you take a donation letter for the food bank for these, Vulcan ovens that are basically brand new and the Sub-Zero? And, oh, sure, yeah, I don't care, if you want to donate it. I'm like, all right, okay, well, we'll do the donation letter. So
it's an interesting thing because a friend of mine described it, said most of the kitchens look like the slabs of marble that you should be doing autopsies on instead of preparing a dinner. And I mean, I literally have a toaster oven and I have a hot plate. I have a little Japanese hot plate, and all these young people come in and they think there's going to be a staff and there's going to be one of those big old kitchens, and they come in and they look at it and they're like, and you can do everything. I mean, I just take one salmon out and I put another salmon in, and I do 5-course meals, and you just don't need all this stuff that they buy and the trappings of it. But it's quite funny. But the archives, to answer your question, John, so the young people come here and they see this stuff and they're really blown away. I mean, it's an emotional experience for a lot of them because they see Gene's handwriting, they see his Converse tennis shoes, they see his hats, and I don't want to put all that stuff in a place that's nobody will be able to access. So my idea, if I live long enough and if I can generate enough money somewhere down the line, which is not my strong suit, is to create a virtual archive, and that it would go up and be available in perpetuity. And that basically anybody who wants to access it and get in and explore it and get inside Gene's head, they'll hear him talking about something, and they'll hear his voice, and they'll be able to read his letters, and they'll be able to see his transcripts and things. And if it's a little boy who's interested in baseball, but he hates dance, he's going to be able to click in and hear Gene's comments about baseball and why it's the connection and things. So that's my dream, but it's incredibly expensive to do. And again, the technology changes. I met with the IT people at USC several years ago, and they've already changed these immersion experiences so much. So I think, the goal is, now I've had the one-woman show. I have the big live symphony show that is a live symphony playing to Gene's clips, and then I'm on stage weaving the stories on that, and that's ready. That's going back out again next year. And then now the ballet, and then I hope to finish the memoir, and then I have 2 books that will come after that are kind of companions to the memoir of the beautiful photographs done by people like Stieglitz and Eisenstein and Robert Capa and Bob Willoughby, and I want those done beautifully on beautiful paper, and then I want a record of his objects, the objet, that the little things like Converse tennis shoes, the things that people get to see in the house that they'll never get to see someplace else. So, and then comes the archive, I guess, that'll launch, and I just have to pedal really fast because I mean I'm 62 and a half now, and I feel like I've just got to keep moving pretty fast, keep all these things going.
Well, you're doing a wonderful job for his legacy. It's wonderful.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
I mean, he's a historical important figure. So,
well, it's a
there
privilege.
Generations of scholars are going to be thanking you for this.
Well, the thing is, it's funny because as I say, it really is a privilege, and I feel very privileged that he entrusted me with it, because I think he knew intrinsically that I would. I mean, he was very specific that how he wanted to be remembered and to get this out and everything. I think he knew I would do that, and I promised him that I would that way. And I think too, the thing is, if he were not a decent guy, if he were not, I couldn't do it. I mean, there were a lot of those Hollywood guys that were not, they weren't that bright, they weren't that nice, they certainly weren't Renaissance men. You didn't spot a lot of those. And the man of such integrity, a really deep integrity and humility. I think all those characteristics, you feel you're proud to present that, as opposed to kind of like, yeah, I know that about him. So there's no.
Your husband speak Italian, you said?
Yeah, he spoke because the Italians on the street. It was this polyglot group at the time, growing up in the Depression era and everything, and so they taught him all the games, the games with marbles, and the games, hand game, that game, and what's it called? It starts with an M. It starts with an M. You throw your hand a certain way. Anyway, they taught him all this stuff. And so I remember when I went to Patsy's in New York. I don't know if any of you have been to Patsy's restaurant. Yeah. Patsy's was where Gene always went, and Frank Sinatra too. And I started going there after Gene died. We were supposed to go when he was alive, but he got sick. And so I started going there, and there's a great Italian waiter there, and he used to speak Italian with Gene and would help prepare the special food that Gene wanted and everything. But yeah, it was fun. Gene was very interesting in that he was very respectful of other, making an effort. Now you hear people, they don't want to learn another person's language. They think that person should learn their language. And Gene always, if we visited some country or spoke to some official from another country, he always knew at least enough to have a conversation. And I remember it was particularly evident to me when Havel came from abroad, and Gene had me go out to the bookstore to get all of his writings, and he read everything before they met. Wow. And then but then he spoke to him and in Czech, and it was I think that again is another kind of lost art, that you're honoring the person you're meeting. So you if it's a French person, it's entrechet and things. So I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot of lessons. It was, I mean, in some degree, it was kind of My Fair Lady. It was a lot of kind of, I mean, he Pygmalion, I was Galatea, I guess, in the sense of learning how to go to the White House, how to go to Windsor Castle, how to go to any event and feel comfortable, I guess.
Thank you.
Amazing. I know we're out of time, but I do hope that you will come back, because I feel like there was such a breadth of material to get through. There were so many movies that we still wanted to talk about, but it's just impossible to get through it in one session with you.
Well, I would gladly join up with you anytime. So just reach out, and I'm delighted to know about this Culinary archive. I want to explore that a little bit more. And if you do have any, I'll let you know what I have here in my records, and we'll share our records a bit from that night, certainly.
Perfect. Well,
Thank you,
thank
Kelly.
you. We are going to schedule you to come back because,
Great.
as I said, we still have so many movies that we really wanted to get your spin on and we wanted to talk about. We thank you. It was a privilege to have you here and to have a conversation with you. Thank you for the work you're doing. You're a film historian, and I think to be able to pick your brain just for the hour that we've been talking to you, it's been a pleasure and an honor.
Well, thank you. And please, John, it's Patricia. So if we're going to carry on this conversation, we'll go. But and what fun. I mean, I love it. That's the problem, is I kind of stray off, and that's
what makes it fun. That's what makes you fun.
And then we go, oops, I didn't answer that question or anything. But I'm happy, and we can go into all kinds of stuff. I'm going to dig in because I bet I may have some of the stuff from the. You were only there in the Clinton time, right? Not under the Bush.
Oh, I think we lost Marty's audio. I think we lost your audio.
Sorry about that, guys. I was saying this is 6 presidents now that I've worked with, but the actual cooking every day in the house was only with the Clintons every single day. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. But would you have been there for the Kennedy Center honors and things in the past? I'll let you know what they were.
Yes. Yep. 93 to 96. Yeah.
Okay. That would have been, okay. Yeah. So I'll have to look at when we went for that. We went in 91, definitely, for the Kennedy Center honors and things. So,
and I'm hopeful that you enjoy haggis and get a good cockaliki soup while you're in Scotland.
Yep.
I teach Scottish cookery in the classes and do all the authentic stuff. And we watch Outlander on television on Stars all the time, religiously. So we're both Scottish. My wife and I part Scottish. So when you come back, maybe we can get some permission to roll some of the footage, maybe just a small clip, and want to hear all about your adventure overseas.
That'd be awesome.
Great. Okay. We'll see Scottish Ballet is very good about documenting things, and probably will have, I know they're documenting all the rehearsals and things. I'm going in on Zoom calls to watch the rehearsals. And so they're definitely documenting the process. And there are beautiful photographs of Gene from the 1960s, those glorious black and white photos of that elegant, the things that you just, what an
Yes,
experience.
these are the photos actually from the website. Tickets are open, so please, folks, if you want to read more, check out the photos and see all the information.
There he is, rehearsing. And I'll be there on the first night, the 23rd, and I'll also be there on the second night. The second cast will be on the 24th. So I'll be there 2 nights, and I'll be there all. As I said, I'm doing my one-woman show in Inverness at Eden Court on September 5th, and they should put that up for sale pretty soon too. And so I'll have a month of Scotland, which I don't mind one bit. I love it there.
Oh man, I'm so jealous. Yeah. We have friends going over there for a week, and I've been to Scotland so many times. I don't actually know. It pisses my wife off. She's like, well, I'm sure you know, like, how many times? I'm like, I don't actually know. Like,
well, why don't you surprise her with a surprise trip to Glasgow? Why don't you just buy her a ticket, fly to Glasgow?
I would love to.
Come for the opening of our ballet, and it will be spectacular, starstruck, and she'll just fall head over heels for you again.
I would flip out at any opportunity to cook for any future event. If you have a gala event or a fundraiser or anything, my wife and I have raised as much as $567,000 in one night at a dinner for cystic fibrosis. So this is what we do. But yeah,
but
folks,
the real question is, how do you do with a toaster oven and a hot plate?
Yeah, no, we get the venue, the country club, or wherever it's going to be held, and let them do all the cooking.
Oh, I don't do any of that fancy stuff. I just do the. You will die when you see the arrangement. I mean, it is. I really should have. Everybody said you should do a television show, and it would have been perfect to be, if she hadn't taken the Barefoot Contessa. I would, because Gene used to call me the Duchessa, so I could have been the Duchessa. But now she's already taken that. But people would crack up if they saw how I make these meals and what happens, and the fiascos of how one person gets 55 people with a seated dinner. It's seated. I set the table.
See, that's a cooking show in itself, because this is all how Jordan Belfort from The Wolf of Wall Street, when he was in prison, was sitting there and telling, Cheech Marin, like, since you're in prison, we actually have a vegetarian cooking club, so you should come and cook with us. And he started cooking and everything, and they heard all his stories and told him, you got to make a movie about all this crazy, The Wolf of Wall Street. This is like unbelievable. So he did. He made a movie, but it started with cooking and just cooking in prison. So Jordan Belfort, The Wolf of Wall Street, was his cellmate.
I don't mind the cooking part. I'll skip the prison part. But all right, guys.
Thank
all
you.
Right.
Take care now.
Just reach out to me. I would love to. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks,
So,
Patricia.
I will. Thank you.
You're welcome.
okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.